Almost 2 weeks ago, the government announced that all 500 rupee notes and 1000 rupee notes are no longer legal tender. In the last 2 weeks, we've seen citizens from across the country in big cities like Bombay and Delhi, in small towns, in rural villages, line up at banks trying to exchange that currency that they have for the new currency, which is the new 2000 rupee note that's already been issued, and new 500 and 1000 rupee notes will also be issued. Now, effectively, the government has done this to unearth black money. If you had stacks of currency lying at home and were standing in line to exchange that currency, then you could be in deep trouble right now. And that's exactly what we're going to find out. How much trouble could you be in? With me, I have tax expert and founder of Dhruva Advisors, Dinesh Kanabar. Mr. Kanabar, thank you very much for joining us.
Welcome.
I am sure that your phone has not stopped ringing for the last 2 weeks. Am I correct?
Well, people keep on asking number of queries indeed, and those queries are not very easy to answer.
Yeah, okay, fine. It never is the case with black money, right? So here's what we are going to try and examine: the various scenarios of cash that you may be holding and that you have sought to exchange, and what that could mean from a tax implication point of view. And if you have any questions, we're happy to take them and put them to Mr. Kanabar. So make sure you post your question at the bottom of this feed on Facebook and on Twitter. Now, the first scenario is deposits of up to 2 lakh rupees, or 2.5 lakhs, I think, is what the government said. The government has repeatedly assured us, Mr. Kanabar, that if you are a housewife or just regular citizen and you're depositing up to 2.5 lakh rupees in your bank account, we will not come after you. Do you believe that?
So I think first and foremost, before we come to what is the government's position, let's just understand what is the law.
Right.
If you have got cash on hand, and that cash on hand is something which you can explain and deposit in your bank account, nobody can ask you a question. Okay. Whether that cash on hand is 2,50,000, whether that cash on hand is 2 crores of rupees.
Yeah.
But it has to be legitimate cash.
Right.
And so long as you have legitimate cash and you deposit into the bank, nobody can ask you a question. What the government is telling us is that the reason why we are going after this whole thing is to unearth large-scale black money. This is not about really harassing the common man. And therefore, they have set up what is a de minimis rule. And de minimis rule is that if you're putting up to 2.5 lakh rupees, we would like to sort of leave you alone. If you happen to be a housewife, you could have accumulated money, you don't keep books of accounts. If you don't keep books of accounts, I'm not going to harass you. So really, it is an intention of the government manifest of not wanting to harass the middle class people.
Okay, but today, 18th November, they've put out a release. This is from the Department of Revenue, and they have said that it was announced earlier that small deposits made by artisans, workers, housewives would not be questioned by the Income Tax Department in the fact, or in view of the fact, that the present exemption limit for income tax is 2.5 lakhs. But reports are being received of instances where people are using other persons' bank accounts to convert their black money into new notes. Okay, for which reward is also being given to those whose accounts are being used. This activity has also been reported in the case of Jan Dhan accounts. It is hereby clarified that such tax evasion activities can be made subject to income tax and penalty established. Now, my question is this: suppose I'm a housewife, I had cash in my house, I've put it in the bank. The government assured me a week ago that if it's up to 2.5 lakhs, it will not matter, they will not come after me. Today they're saying they may come after me. What's going to happen to me?
And that's why I began with the preface, to say there is a principle which is, if you can explain your money, it can't be subject matter of taxation. It can't be a subject matter of inquiry. If you can't, it can be. And I think herein lies the whole issue. The issue, and we must not blow what the government is saying out of context. The government came back to say, we assure you as a middle class citizen that this is not to harass you. However, if you are using this to protect somebody else, can we turn a blind eye to you? And I would say that the government, there's really no dichotomy in that. All that the government said is, so let's take a simple example. Somebody is earning 15,000 rupees a month, barely surviving. The household is barely surviving, 2 meals a day, maybe 1.5 meal a day. And you suddenly come back and say, oh no, but the housewife had said 2.5 lakhs. Looks incongruous. That means somebody is trying to take advantage of a situation where the government said will not come and harass you. Right. Now, it's not a question of harassment, but now you are becoming a tool to somebody else. And all that the government is saying is, if you are becoming a tool to somebody else who's trying to convert black to white, then we have a right to ask you. Because what was stated earlier was a principal intent, and the government, I think, is very keen on that intent. But it's simply that if you are misusing something which is being granted to you as an exemption from inquiry, then you cannot not be subjected to an inquiry.
But how will they, Mr. Kanabar, identify what is misuse and what was legitimate cash lying around at home, which you have now had to exchange because those currency notes are no longer valid? How will they identify the misuse? Because it could be a housewife's account. She may have no income established in the past. Suddenly she could be keeping in her account minimal sums of 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. Suddenly there's a 2.5 lakh rupee deposit in her account. It could be a worker who was keeping 20, 30,000 rupees in his account. Maybe he had, been keeping some cash at home with his parents or with his wife, now needs to deposit that into the bank. Are they going to go after everybody, ask you for some initial proof, then eliminate you if you don't look suspicious or shady? How will they do it?
So I should put two things. First of all, I do not think the government really has the machinery and a mechanism, administrative mechanism, to deal with something like that.
Correct.
So apart from de minimis, the government also trying to be sort of smart here to say we cannot possibly address millions of accounts which are just 2.5 lakh of rupees.
Right.
We would like to go after the big fish. And I think what will happen in a situation like that is a suspicious activity. So let's say we have a village, and in that village there are 1,000 households, and that village has never had really this activity of anybody having bank account except for Jan Dhan Yojana, and suddenly there is a report to say here is a politician who has gone and given money to every housewife and she's going and deposit. So I think it's a question of circumstances, it's a question of really how does one create perception. Can that create harassment? Well, it could create harassment in the form of fact that somebody is being asked a question, but to take away that right from the government would be absolutely incorrect, unfortunately.
Okay, so I get it. If you had a Jan Dhan account, until now there were 2 rupees in that account, right? We discovered that many accounts had only 1 rupee to show a balance in it. And suddenly there's 2.4 lakh rupees in that account, right? Then that's fairly suspicious. The government has the right to ask a question. Let's assume it's not a Jan Dhan account. It's an ordinary account. I've put 2.4 lakh rupees in it. The government comes and asks me a question. Fair enough. What do I have to do to prove that this is not illegitimate income? What documentation should I have had on hand, in my favor?
So, two questions first of all. Why would somebody just have 2.4 lakhs just because the limit is 2.5?
Or 2 lakhs or 1.5. Yeah, I'm just using a number short of 2.5.
No. You are using that number.
Correct.
I'm making that as an answer to your number.
Yeah.
To say that the very fact that you chose 2,45,000, is it really that you are trying to take, because you would deposit whatever you have got.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, if I got 1,80,000, I'll deposit 1,80,000. If I got 160, so the very fact that you are closing that, you are to say that you are trying to take advantage of a situation. 2.5 lakh is not an immunity scheme. It was a scheme to ensure that ordinary people are not harassed.
Right.
It was not an immunity scheme. From day one, I was interviewed on television within, or the first person really, at least on a particular channel, within 30 seconds of the Prime Minister's speech. And I said, this is not a VDIS. Since then, I've heard a lot that it is a VDIS, and I continue to believe it is not.
No, it's not a VDIS.
So, coming back, it's a question of circumstances. You will be asked a few questions. I can't tell you what those questions would be, and hopefully they'll not be the nature of harassment. But you would come back and say, yes, my husband is earning 40,000 rupees a month. I've been saving 10,000 rupees a month, and I've got it. And I don't think the government can go anything beyond that. But unless there is something else to indicate the nature of suspicion and nothing more than that.
All right, fine. So I think that closes the conversation on the first scenario that we've laid out, which is that if you had, let's say, cash of up to 2,50,000 and you deposit it into a bank account, these are the circumstances under which you may be questioned. And if only there is some suspicious activity, would the government likely come and ask you questions? And then all you have to do is explain your very legitimate premise. The second scenario is you have deposits, or you have deposited cash of more than 2.5 lakh rupees, right? But this is all legitimate income. This is income that you had earned earlier on, and income that you are now showing up because you had all of this money lying around in your house. What is the chance that you will get an inquiry from the tax department?
So I would break actually this into one more part, that is in excess of 2.5 lakh, but under 10 lakhs of rupees, and in excess of 10 lakhs of rupees.
Okay.
And the reason I said this, there's a category that government has really put. And to my mind, again, I go back to the first principle. You could have actually 10 crores of rupees lying in your house. You are showing it as cash on hand. Your accounts are audited year on year. So you close your 31st March accounts for 16 and you showed that cash on hand. Why would you keep such a cash on hand is a different question altogether. But you got it year on year and the tax office has accepted. 2 years back, you were paying wealth tax, and even during wealth tax, you were showing such a lot of things. You deposit. Would you be questioned? The answer is yes. Meaning, the moment the deposit is in excess of 2.5 lakh, there is a permanent account number which you got to provide, and the government will ask you a question. And the government has put a presumption that if it is more than 10 lakhs, because that's what people ordinarily hold, then maybe the burden of proof is even larger. I would think that distinction is not warranted at all.
Okay.
The onus is on a person depositing the account to say, here is a books of accounts, this shows I've got this cash on hand, I have deposited. And there is a point I would just like to make here, Menaka. I find all sorts of things, particularly in social media, somebody coming back and showing, oh, the demonetization has become such a success because people have deposited 4 lakh crores of rupees. And I can't understand. People have legitimate cash they are depositing. That's neither failure nor a success of demonetization. People who can explain why they have got the cash in the books of accounts, they got something from a particular source, so long as you are able to explain the source. It is only that higher the number, the higher will be the questioning and the burden of proof on you, but it's just the same. You are able to show what you have got. I would not be worried one bit. And I've known of people who have got large sums who have actually gone and deposited, all genuine in the books of accounts. There's nothing to worry about.
Okay, important point that you made there, that all cash is not black money. I mean, I think the perception that's being built that, oh, just because so much money has come into bank deposits, that doesn't mean it's all black money.
And
all black money is definitely not cash.
Absolutely.
Let's be honest about that,
in fact,
because it's held in so many other asset forms.
I would put the other way around, that all cash which would have been deposited thus far in the bank account is most likely, barring this case of misuse of housewife and all of that, to be genuine money. That's why a person would go and deposit it.
Otherwise, they'd be right now figuring out what to do with that cash, either burn it or find other ways, or hawala routes, etc. If any of those are open right now, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you're saying that if you had more than 2.5 lakhs in cash that you deposit in a bank, as long as this is legitimate income and you have enough paperwork to prove that this is...
I'll just make one change, not legitimate income, legitimate cash.
Legitimate cash.
Because you may have been carrying cash. So people keep, particularly in a city like Bombay, where even today, you incur medical expenses, you have got people at home, or you can use a credit card, but there are times it becomes very difficult. You just have 2, 3, 4 lakhs of rupees at cash at home. Nothing wrong with it at all, and you go and deposit it.
Okay, and so as long as you can show how you got that cash, you are safe, you have nothing to worry about. But there could be instances of harassment here, because imagine this, if you had 50 lakhs lying at home. Now, I don't know why anybody would keep 50 lakhs in cash, but let's assume they had some reason to keep 50 lakhs in cash, and they put it in the bank account. Is an inquiry a sure shot, or is a question from the tax department a sure shot? Should they be prepared for the tax department knocking at their doors?
So, when you deposit cash of 50 lakhs of rupees, I'm taking that as a number
just
because
as
you put hypothetical number, that means you are a taxpayer. I mean, it could be a situation, unless you are an agriculturist, and I'll come to that in a separate subject, but I'm presuming you are a taxpayer. You put cash, you will be asked that question as to where did that cash come from. And you would go and say, this is my books of accounts, this is audited, this is the balance on so and so date. Now, if you consider that inquiry to be harassment, that's an harassment, because nobody can ask me a question beyond that. Nobody can come and ask me that question, why did I keep 50
But they can dispute, right? They can say, but this amount doesn't really look proportionate to all the income you've been declaring all these years.
And I disagree with you.
I mean, they could question, have you really, you may say, I saved more than I spent, and therefore I have managed to save up so much, and therefore I kept it in cash at home. And they may say, well, how do we know that you saved more than you spent?
And you're spot on. I think it really goes down to a fact pattern. And I'll put 2 fact patterns.
Okay.
I'm earning 20 lakh rupees a year. Okay. I have maintaining books of accounts, and for whatever reason, I've got 25 lakh rupees lying in my house. And my books of accounts show that. Nobody can ask me why I did it, why I didn't do it. It's more than a year's income, but that's what I choose to do. My books of accounts are audited. I was, when cash in hand was taxable on wealth tax, I was paying taxes. Nobody can dispute. Take another fact pattern. You come back and say that every year I have been disclosing 20 lakh rupees of income. Suddenly in this year, I have got 10 crores of rupees. There is no way you could have accumulated that from past income. You deposit it. Then the only thing that you can say is I earned this year. Does that really not smack of a situation where you ought to be questioned by the tax office that every year you are earning 20 lakhs of rupees, how come did you earn 10 crores this year?
Okay.
It's just that. It's nothing more than that. So one can blow up the fears of exaggeration, and I'm very sure that there'll be individual cases where somebody can come back and say harassment, but the way I see it is fairly straightforward. What are your circumstances? Nobody can ask me why do I, so going back to your question, 50 lakhs of rupees, I have got books of accounts. My books of accounts are audited year on year. There's a tax audit happening. Last 5 years, you see my return, it is showing 50 lakhs of cash on hand. I have got it on the date on which demonetization happened. Nobody can ask me a question. Where is a question of saying I disbelieve? It's, and that's why I'm trying to make a distinction between the point which you made regarding income. It has nothing to do with income.
It's
it has to do with cash on hand.
Right.
If I can show why do I have cash on hand. Now, come back to say that I, as I said, 10 lakhs of rupees each year I earn, and I put 10 crores. How did I get that cash on hand? It's absolutely a suspicious set of circumstances.
Right.
Would I be asked a question? Yes. Would I be asked a very deep question? The answer is yes. If can I answer it? If I can't answer, the consequences are what they are, and we can talk about that separately.
Okay, we'll want to talk about the consequences. Now we're talking about you or any citizen having made a deposit of cash of more than 2.5 lakhs. Now, let's assume this was undeclared income from the past years. In simple words, black money. What is it that you're going to face from the tax department, right? And this is really what the government is going after. At the end of the day,
absolutely.
there is no dispute about the fact that these are the people the government wants to hunt down.
Absolutely.
Now, what happens to them? Can they say that this is income I earned this year? Or like the example you gave me, if you've been earning 20 lakhs every year for the past 5 years, and suddenly this year you're showing 80 lakhs or 1 crore or 5 crores, the department's going to ask you questions, right? Can you say, and if you can prove that it's income from this year, then what are the penalties? If you can't prove it's income from this year, what are the penalties? And the last question in this framework of questions, could you go to jail?
So let's first go to the event which preceded the demonetization, which was that the government came out with a voluntary disclosure, income disclosure scheme,
right,
and came back and said, if you got unaccounted income, please pay 45%.
Correct.
30% by way of tax, 15% by way of whatever else, and we will sort of give you immunity from any other penalties or prosecution. So the government stated position was, you got monies, undeclared cash, please pay 45 and move on. And therefore it cannot be the government's intention, and I'm just now on the intention, to say that scheme has just gone by, monies were declared whatever they were, there have been various numbers. The last I've heard is 72,000 crores, but really I still keep on hearing a variety of rumors in and around that, but just sticks to 72,000 crores. On that 72,000 crores, people paid 45% tax, not
correct,
paid, have to pay, because some
right,
of it is deferred and up to next September. And it can never be the government's intention that after that, today if you declare something, you are going to pay normal income tax. I'm on the intention at this point of time. That intention was very much manifest in the Revenue Secretary's statement when he tweeted immediately on the next day that if you are going to deposit cash, which cannot be explained, which is your undisclosed income, not only will you have to pay taxes, but you will have to pay 200% penalty.
correct.
Now let me just come to that in a minute. So the penal provisions in the Income Tax Act are contained in what is known as Section 270 capital A of the Income Tax Act. And that section, the way it reads today, basically provides that if there is an unreported income, then you have got to pay a penalty. And there are two situations provided. One is if there is an unreported income, then 50% penalty applies. And if that unreported income happens to be on account of a misdeclaration, then you pay a 200% penalty.
Okay.
Okay. So one is a simple error, something else, legal interpretation, it could be 50%, otherwise it is 200. But in either case, the requirement is that your assessed income and returned income have to vary. Without that, there is no question of levying that penalty.
Got it.
And therefore, if one goes by a strict legal interpretation of the law as it stands today, if you went and deposited that taxes, the government cannot levy penalty under Section 270A. There is a strict legal position. And I would not subscribe to that position for a reason, Menaka, that while the law reads very categorically, you have been warned. You have been warned that that is not what the government wants.
Right.
And therefore, I would not rule it past the government to come back in this budget and amend that section, because penalty is to be levied in respect of the law as it applies on the first day of the assessment year, which is yet to commence.
Right.
And the government will go back and amend the law because you have been already put on a notice. This is not something which the government is doing retrospective or surreptitiously.
Right.
You have been told that if there is undisclosed income, not only are we going to ask you to pay taxes, we are also going to levy penalty. So strict legal interpretation of the law as it stands today, 270A penalty cannot be applied. The government has already said it wants to go ahead and do that, and I would not be surprised if in the coming budget, and why I would not be surprised, I would rather actually budget to say in the forthcoming budget, the government is going to sort of make changes to the law and go back and say the law would not only be in respect, any amounts deposited under demonetization scheme which cannot be explained would be regarded as unreported income.
Okay. So if I've understood this correctly, what you're saying is if I had, let's say 50 crores or 50 lakhs, let's assume, in cash lying at home, and I go and deposit it in the bank account, and clearly my income from the previous years does not explain how I could have accumulated so much cash, then if I choose to suggest that this is income I made this year, I've got to have bloody strong proof to show that suddenly this was a bumper year for me.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
If I have that proof, great, I'm home free.
No problems.
No problems.
Yeah.
If I don't have that proof and I try and say, no, but this is income I've earned this year, and you cannot consider this assessed income, and since you cannot consider this assessed income because I'm declaring this income in this year, you cannot levy a 200% penalty.
There is no difference between my reported income and my assessed income.
Correct. So only a 50% penalty can be levied.
No, even 50 can't be.
Even 50 can't be.
Because
so then I don't pay anything. I just pay the tax that is due on that amount.
That's it. That's the law, or a strict legal interpretation of law.
Okay. So if I was to show that 50 lakhs as this year's income, and I was able to prove that this is this year's income, I pay just the tax on that as per my bracket, which would typically be at this amount, 34%, right? If I was not able to show this is this year's income, then the government has up to 200% in terms of penalty to levy
Not
on
up to
me.
200%.
200%.
200%. There
So
used
they
to
will.
because there was, and the reason I say not up to is because earlier there was a law which allowed an officer to levy penalty of between 100 to 300%.
Correct.
The government wanted to take away discretion, and therefore they amended the law just to provide two circumstances, and depending on which circumstance you fell under, it was either 50 or 200%.
So it is, if I cannot prove that I really have had a bumper year in terms of income, and
then
that
you have
this is
misreported
money,
your income.
then I've misreported my income, and even though it is not assessed, they can levy that 200% penalty on me.
No, it will be assessed.
Yeah, but it's not assessed at this point in time.
Agreed.
Right? It's not assessed in this point in time.
So
That's where the legal argument lies.
So let's take a fact pattern. You have reported 20 lakh of rupees of income each year. This year you go and deposit 10 crores of rupees. And you say, I earned my income 10 crores. The preponderance of probability is, unless you can demonstrate conclusively how suddenly it happened that you earned 10 crores, that this is something which is fishy.
Right.
If you can't do that, then your statement that it's current year's income would not be accepted. Strict legal interpretation, you have already declared, therefore the government can't levy penalty. Government has already made its intention clear that we subject to a penalty, and therefore I would be very sort of sure that there will be some amendment to law clarifying this position, and the penalty will be levied.
So you get ready to be
absolutely
penalized 200%.
And you have been warned in advance. Don't pretend that now the sort of I interpreted the law and
so you pay tax on that amount, and you pay a penalty of 200%, or is it just a penalty of 200% of the tax?
And 200% of tax as penalty.
So you're effectively paying tax 3 times over.
That's right.
That's how it will turn out to be,
that's right? That's
now, suppose if the numbers are not as clear as you're putting out. You say 20 lakhs of income every year, this year cash deposit of 10 crores. Those numbers are easy to judge. 20 lakhs of income every year, this year cash deposit of
50
2
lakhs.
crores.
50 lakhs.
Yeah, or 50 lakhs or whatever.
So the burden.
What happens then?
The burden of proof is on you to show that so how do you earn cash income? So every year you declare 20 lakhs.
Right.
And potentially that didn't come in cash. That came by checks.
Okay.
Okay. Now this year you deposited 50 lakh cash. Suddenly how did you start earning 50 lakhs in cash? The burden of proof is on you. Whether it is 50 lakhs or 50 crores or 10 crores. The burden of proof is totally, the fact that you are saying cash came this year, until now you are earning everything by a check, or let's put you are earning cash, how did it suddenly multiply? You got to prove where did you get the money from.
Okay. Can you go to jail, or is it just 3 times the tax as you pointed out?
So Again, very interesting. If you look at the law, there are two potential sections which apply. One, and I'm not being too technical here, but just to give you a flavor, there is a section 276C which speaks about concealment of income.
Right.
And there is an explanation which gives under what circumstances would income be regarded as having been concealed. And one of the provisions there, which is a very interesting one, is that if there is circumstance which you have created as would indicate that you don't want to pay your taxes, interest or penalty. So meaning that if you have deposited money, as we said, 10 lakhs of rupees each year you are earning, you put 5 crores of rupees, and the circumstances exist to prove that this was not your income for the year, maybe it was for the past years. Had you paid, maybe you would have paid the same taxes, but you would have paid interest and maybe you escape penalty. Okay? Then prosecution under section 276C would lie, number one. And that's jail.
How much? How long can you be sent to jail for?
There are different numbers. It goes from 3 months to 7 years.
To 7 years.
7 years.
So you could be potentially jailed. I'm just worst case
No,
scenario.
I'll just come.
Okay,
We are halfway through.
Okay, okay.
Then we have section 277, which speaks of misverification of the return of income, because every return of income that you file, you sign an affidavit to say that the particulars of income given therein are true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief. And therefore, if those particulars were not correct, you could have a separate section 277 prosecution. As it happens today, again, the law, the way that it reads is there is a section 279, which specifically provides that prosecution under section 276 and 277 can not be applied in a situation where you are subjected to a penalty under 270A and that penalty has been reduced.
Okay.
And therefore, a strict legal interpretation could be, and there are no precedents to this, is that where penalty is not leviable at all under section 270A, because that's the way the law reads today, then prosecution also cannot lie.
Fair enough. That seems logical, right? Yeah. So if you don't pay penalty, you don't go to jail. But you're saying that under 277, if I remember correctly, that you could be found guilty of having misrepresented your income and you could get jail time varying from 3 months to 7 years.
276C.
How often are tax offenders sent to jail?
There have been very, very few cases. The most recent cases where people are being prosecuted, not sent to jail, because sending to jail and beginning a prosecution are again time-consuming things, are the HSBC accounts, where the government has gone after somebody. It takes years and years and years for somebody to get convicted.
Okay. Now, let me look at variations of what you've told me, right? Because you've now given me a clear indication that if you fall into this bracket, you could be facing, let's say, an up to 200% penalty, as you were pointing out. 200% penalty, which is actually 3 times the tax that you end up paying, right? Because it's tax plus. And you said that you could go to jail for up to 7 years.
Yep.
Mr. Kanabar, what if I broke up that 10 crore amount, deposited 2 crores in my wife's account, my 2 crores in my husband's account, 2 crores in my mother-in-law's account, 1 crore in my father-in-law's account, the fact is,
each one of them would have the very same consequence because the burden of proof is the same in every case.
But the difference is this: a 10 crore deposit pops up on a screen. Let's assume that, Bond film, income tax department is sitting there, multiple, screens. There are these transactions and deposits all popping up. 10 crores will pop up. 50
2.5 lakh is the number they have said that every day.
Yeah, but there are millions of Indians. How many are they going to look at? What if I broke it all up and said 50 lakhs here, 25 lakhs here, my brother-in-law's account, another 15 lakhs? What are the chances that they would all be flagged?
So, you're asking me a question that has nothing to do with law, Menaka. I can only talk to you about what does the law say. Practically, the government's ability to monitor and track is really going to be the way. So a question, for example, and which is not what you and I are discussing, is that is demonetization a good way to really curb black money?
Yes.
We are not discussing that.
Yeah.
Okay, and there could be multiple views to that, but at the end of the day, this is one of those legs. And if the government does want demonetization to be successful and curbing black money, then its ability to track and go down on people without creating harassment is going to be the key thing. So, for example, today, government is being accused, rightly, wrongly, whatever, of saying that because it did not logistically implement the scheme right, people are being harassed, there are queues, etc., etc. So that does not really impact the principle. The principle is either demonetization is right or wrong, and if it is right, it is implemented in the wrong way, which is causing harassment. Similarly, will the government be able to really track down everybody, go after everybody? Question number one. And then in that process, not really cause any harassment to a genuine taxpayer? Those are questions which really will depend on individual. That's unfortunately the implementation of tax laws. Howsoever you may come out with circulars or whatever else, really depends on an individual tax revenue gatherer. If the assessing officer approaches this in an incorrect manner, overlooks something, if my IT does not allow, information technology does not allow me to track, if my mechanism, my people are unable to track, nothing can happen. And I can give you some examples. The government has got a survey scheme for when you buy something, you don't give permanent account number, you receive a letter from the government, you don't respond to it, nothing happens. Everything goes into a dustbin. Now, if that's the attitude, and I don't think that's going to be the attitude, then people will not be able to be tracked down. So that's a matter of implementation rather than law. And therefore, I would just come back to your question that if I broke 10 crores into 6 and I put 1.5 crores each way, it's equally going to be stacking up. Does the government have the mechanism? Will it actually do it? How will the tax office implement? I can't comment.
Okay, we have a couple of questions that have come in from viewers. One, Mr. Bharat Kamdar asks, saying, can the government identify who is being used as a tool? I suppose the question means that, you know, if you deposited money in your account on my behest, the Jan Dhan Yojana illustration that we were talking about, can the government go after you and me? Will it go after only me because it's my black money? Will it go after you because you've been an accomplice of sorts? Or you could say, I was arm twisted by my employer. You know, I mean, we've heard all these stories of, you know, domestic help being asked to stand in line and deposit accounts and things like that.
So first and foremost, let's just put a fact pattern, and then let's say we have a domestic help and he goes and deposits 2.5 lakh of rupees. His salary is 7,000 rupees, and there's no way he could have got 2.5 lakh. Okay, so first of all, this is his sort of undisclosed income, so he would come into play. Second, if he is able to give that answer as to for whom did he work, and the government can sort of put that at the doorstep of who it was, then both of them would be in trouble.
Both would be in trouble.
Absolutely.
Okay, and one would have to pay up to 200% tax on his income.
That's right.
Or
go to jail.
Or go to jail. But the accomplice also might, you know, face as serious penalties or prosecution?
There is a provision, and I must confess that I need to probably look it up, but there is a specific provision where an accomplice is also subject matter of imprisonment.
Okay. We've discussed situations that confront individuals at this point in time. There are many situations that will confront corporations, I would imagine, as well. I don't know whether they would be hoarding cash in black in the way we have visualized these, but we have a question coming in from Vimal Lakhotia. He says, as religious trusts are exempted, what's the possibility that they are being used for black money conversions in connivance with local politicians? Seems to be a little bit more general a question than pertinent to this conversation.
If I understand right, just today, the charity commissioner has issued a notification to say any deposits into the bank account of a charitable trust needs to be explained and needs to be deposited on the same day. Okay. So one hears horror stories. As a first comment, Menaka, I would say is that when I hear people participate in conversions and whatever else, maybe we are not getting the message that what is the government's intention and that the government is determined. Okay, we are still trying to find loopholes, which I don't think is the right approach to anything in life. Be that as be, that's an individual call, and who am I to? I'm not trying to preach morality and whatever else. All that I would say is that, ordinarily speaking, when you deposit, if there is a deposit of cash found in a hundi, whatever, if somebody finds it like that, I would suggest that they take a video of it so that it is demonstrated that it was genuinely there and you are not using it to launder something else.
Okay.
The next question would be, if you are a genuine charitable trust and your income is exempt, the question is, how will the money go back to whoever has put it? That's where the government's tracking mechanism will come in, because obviously somebody has put money for charity. Good luck to charity, because it will go for charitable purpose. And there are enough and more things which the government does to ensure that charities are not misused otherwise. Okay. I would say the government do the same thing and the money will not go back to the person concerned.
Okay. Mr. Kanabar, I get the message very clearly that the government is going after those who are not paying taxes, and like people like you and I who've been paying taxes for all our lives finally feel a sense of equality, that those who have not been paying taxes no longer can sleep easy.
Actually, I would put a comment there, and I say this from a very personal conviction. I sit back and say, I earn 100 rupees, I pay 34 as tax, 66 remains in my bank account. Every time I spend it, I pay VAT, I pay service tax, whatever. And therefore, net, say for example, 55 remains in my hand in terms of that additional tax which goes. And here is somebody else who is earning 100, not paying any taxes. Therefore, his 100 is worth 100 and my 100 is worth 55. That's no equality.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad personally, and I say this with a great deal of conviction, that I'm glad that those equations are being set right.
Okay, but even then, you would have come across in the last few days and weeks in conversations, people suggesting structures to try and get out of this. Can you enlighten us to what you might think are some of the ways people are trying to use structures to get out of this, but hopefully eventually they'll be caught?
I really don't know. And again, I'm giving you a very honest answer and not a diplomatic answer. I'm the last person people will come to try and discuss structures, and if they did come to me, I would say you're talking to a wrong person. What I hear is exactly what you read in the newspapers and nothing more than that, of people talking of dozens of things, whether it is gold or whatever else. But really, I have no knowledge, and I can tell you this again with absolute conviction.
Okay, fine. You have any understanding of what the IT department or the IT infrastructure of the tax department is, and how successful they will be in mining all this bank deposit data and in being able to identify, at least accurately, if not half, then a little less than half of the people who have been evading taxes so far?
I think the IT infrastructure in some sense is breaking at seams.
It is.
It is, because they carried out a number of surveys for the purpose of IDS. We are now having the situation of them having to monitor. Then there are assessments happening, and one wonders how will the tax office comply with the time barring assessments which come on 31st December. And therefore, what I do see practically happening is the larger numbers will come up for scrutiny sooner rather than later. That was the question you were asking me about 10 crores versus 1.5 crore. But I would think that anything which is more than a crore rupees will definitely come under scrutiny. How soon will the government be able to really monitor, go after, and how soon will the penalties be levied is a matter which I'm also sort of looking and hoping that the government is really able to get the logistics right. It's not going to be easy. We're looking at situations all across the country, and I don't think the IT department has an infrastructure to deal with it.
Okay. Well, best of luck to them. But they have what? How many years to look at this year's information and come after you?
So on this specific thing, there are a variety of things. And again, I've heard statements from the tax office, I won't say circulars, but statements to say that they won't even wait for you to file the return of income. I can't understand how can that be possible, because as I said, penalty can be levied only when there is a distinction between returned income and assessed income. So until your assessment happens, how will they do it? Unless again they modify the law to come back and say any amount in demonetization can be viewed differently, reviewed differently, and penalties.
But they would have to modify the law now. In this session, for it to be applicable before the fiscal year ends,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. So really, they have enough and more time. Time is not the issue. They have a few years really to go after it. But the question is there a mechanism? And again, therein lies this issue regarding harassment. Because the last thing you want is a tax office where you are able to explain something incessantly knocking at your doorstep.
Okay, so it would be premature if they started asking questions now.
They
would probably wait till you finished filing your returns for the year. Then they would go through an assessment.
Absolutely.
And if they feel that what you have deposited red flags, versus what you have earned in previous years, then they're probably in a position to come back and ask you questions.
Except in situations like non-taxpayers. So if there are monies in Jan Jan Yojana and all of those things, then probably they don't have to wait for the returns of income. Otherwise, for regular taxpayers, so if I am asked a question, you deposited X amount as cash, all that I would say is, here is my permanent account number. I'll be happy to answer this when my assessment comes up.
And you are within your right to do that?
Absolutely. I would say that, yes, this is...
So if a tax department guy, I pay taxes. If somebody, I haven't deposited any cash, just to be clear, but if I did deposit, let's say 50 lakhs of rupees, And if he knocked at my door tomorrow and he said, hey, look, I want you to explain where you got this 50 lakh rupees, am I well within my rights to say, I'm sorry, please come back after my return for the year has been assessed?
No, you will go back and say, this is my permanent account number, this is my income for the year, I will be returning it in my return of income and happy to explain to you at that point of time. That would be the correct process to follow.
And they would have to back off and wait till I file my return?
I can't tell you how they will behave, and that will also depend
what
on
the law requires.
No, what the law requires today is that, but again, if they find an absolute misuse and they amend the law, then that amendment itself, so the point I'm trying to make to you, Menaka, is slightly different. Today, they can't even do anything but to levy taxes on you. As I explained to you, that's not the intention of the government, and there's a likely amendment to section 278. Now that amendment could encompass an ability not to wait for an assessment. So we'll have to wait to see how does the government, in today's law, that's the situation. I can go back and say, this is my legitimate income. I'm returning it. Happy to explain to you when my assessment comes up.
Okay. And one more question with regards to time. They have what, 7 years to come back and look at your returns? 6 years to come back and look at your returns for a particular year. So you should not sleep easy for 6 years. If you don't get an inquiry from the tax department in the next assessment year, you may get it in any of the years following that.
Yeah. So the tax office can reopen assessments if they believe that something has come to their notice at a later point of time.
Correct.
If you have not filed your return of income, they can ask you to file your return of income. 6 years, absolutely there. And more important, you should be worried that today the Prevention of Money Laundering Act applies only to overseas assets. If it was made applicable to Indian assets, what could the consequences be?
Okay, we have a question from Simranjeet Singh. She says most people have deposited their black money in relatives and friends' accounts. What are the consequences here? Simranjeet, we've already discussed that. So as soon as we end this, you can rewind this clip and watch that. But just to summarize what Mr. Kanabar has told us today, and so correct me if I'm wrong, you've said if your deposit of cash is up to 2.5 lakhs, you have very little reason to worry. Right? Unless you have never deposited money in your account, or there is some glaring reason that it stands out, or it's a Jan Dhan account, as the government has pointed out. If your deposit is more than 2.5 lakh crore rupees in cash, and you can in fact prove to the income tax department that you have this kind of cash in hand through legitimate causes or reasons, then again you have no reason to worry. But if your deposit is more than 2.5 lakhs, and you have no way of showing that this is cash in hand that you could very legitimately have, then you are facing, in your opinion, a 200% penalty plus the tax that you pay. So 3 times the tax and potentially prosecution that could send you to jail. And this is really the legal question everybody's been stuck with, right?
Yeah, so that's the point. So
you said that they will make this modification in the budget session and it will apply retroactively.
That's all. What I'm saying is the law today does not allow them to tax or levy penalty. The government has made its intention very clear.
By saying that we will levy a penalty.
We will levy.
But that intention is not it's only a statement. It's not a change in law. They ought to have changed the law before they did all of this then.
If they change the law and the law becomes effective before 31st March, it's something which, and you know, Menaka, I would just make a comment. You know, I hear this from ever so often. People talk about retrospective amendment, going to a court of law, and I'm just giving you my sense of interpretation. Sure. You go to if a person challenges such an amendment in a court of law, either that's a retrospective or ought not to be there or whatever else, I don't think in today's date and time any court is going to have sympathy. They're going to say this is an attempt to really channelize the money into white, and if you're trying to find a way around it, we are going to uphold any amendment that the government makes.
But that doesn't matter, sir. We know that a punishment is commensurate to the crime is laid out in the law. You cannot suddenly change the punishment or the rules of the game midway, right? If the punishment was that if you can show it as this year's income, therefore it is not part of misrepresented income or earlier assessed income, then you can pay that much, whatever the tax rate is, 34%, and get away with it. So, Menaka, now if they change retroactively, will that not become problematic?
That's what I'm saying, that if you amend it before 31st March, remember that this year the budget is going to be present,
earlier. Yeah.
And if it is passed before 31st March, that is the law as it stood on the first day, and it may not be regarded as being retrospective. That's not an answer which many of the viewers would like to hear, but that's the way I look at the law.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And the last worst case situation is that you could go to jail for up to 7 years. Mr. Kanabar, thank you very much for laying out the consequences of demonetization. The only thing we haven't discussed is whether you think that this is the right way to go after black money or not. Do you want to give us a quick parting answer on that? No, is this really going to be effective in curbing black money in the country?
This can be one of the things. It cannot be the way in which you're going to curb. There are 20 other things which we need to do, and that is a discussion for some other day. Thank you.
Fine. We'll hold that till we finished with this. Thank you very much for watching us here on BloombergQuint, and thanks for your time.
Thank you.